Hey, you're listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I might be ashamed to be your co-host now for this episode. My name is Mark.
I don't mind being your co-host for this episode. This is Billy.
I am probably going to get canceled for this podcast. I am Josh. And we are joined by the gentleman who brought us the movie which we're talking about today, our good friend Devin from You Have to Watch This podcast.
Oh, guys, I don't know whose intro to this I like more. I'm ashamed, or I don't know which one I'm more worried by. I'll be in trouble. I'm ashamed, or I'm excited by. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on this movie.
You know, when I approached you, so if you guys haven't listened before Billy joined us as a co-host, Devin, Mark, and myself, we did a terrible movie showdown.
And they really weren't terrible movies either. They were just fun.
Yeah.
So we pitted Velocipaster, Lamageddon, and what's the other one? Sharknado against one another to find out who was the worst. And so when we put together Surprise September, I was like, Devin, come back and just pick a random movie, but it has to be like a really, really bad horror movie. And you hit us with the Human Centipede 2 full sequence.
Yeah, buddy.
Which I was not expecting whatsoever.
He's like, oh, the guest is coming, and he didn't say who the guest was. He's like, you're gonna hate the movie. It's like, oh, no.
So hold on, did you know
musical?
I had never seen it, so I went back and watched all three of them.
Oh, you poor soul.
And I found the color version of this one.
Wait, what?
Where did you find a color version of this one?
There's a website called Effed Up Movies. EFFEP Up Movies, and it's in color, and it screams right there on the website.
That's wild.
I was watching it like right before we started the podcast.
Was it official, or did someone like add color to it? Like some really devout fan was like, "This needs to be seen in color."
I'm not sure. I did see a couple of articles I was reading where the director was hinting at pictures where he put out in color. So I think he may have released it because it said 2015 on it. So he may have released it, but I watched both of them. So.
All three of them? There are 2, or 1, 2, and 3?
1, 2, 3, and the color version of 2.
Also, Billy went above and beyond because he also watched the Human Centipede episode of South Park.
Spiritual successor.
Hey, I always blame Apple. I always blame Apple.
Who doesn't? Oh, incredible.
But before we get too far into this, for new listeners or people that may be unaware, give us the rundown of your podcast. You Have to Watch This.
So You Have to Watch This podcast is Alan, who is on the Victims and Villains Network, and our buddy Ryan. Each week we make each other watch a movie that one of us hasn't seen. And they're always those movies that you're talking to somebody and you go, how have you not seen this? Like a good example is like Alan hadn't seen Alan hadn't seen Lord of the Rings, any of them. And he's like a grown adult who likes movies. So we're like, oh, you got to watch this. So every week we bring a new thing, and there are glaring holes in my movie watching history. I think I must have lived my late and early teens under a rock. So a good example is I still haven't seen the movie Airplane. And mostly we just hang out, have fun, make each other watch movies. It's a good time. It really is.
Got it. So you've seen the Human Centipede 2, but not Airplane.
I've seen all the Human Centipede. I missed all of Leslie Nielsen's movie career in order to fit in Human Centipede and critical analysis thereof.
And you did it willingly.
That's a strong statement. We don't. As a typical thing to our podcast, You Have to Watch This, we talk about our histories with the movies. I had never willingly sat down in my life to watch a Human Centipede movie. I've seen all 3 of them, and they've all been surprises to me. Everybody's like, hey, let's have a nice, fun movie night. I go, I love Friends, and then Human Centipede shows up.
That's a great question. I am kind of curious where everyone's relationship to this movie was. Billy, you've already said yours, but This movie was like such a gimmick when the first one came out that it was like, I can't believe a filmmaker would do something this grotesque. And so you went to it with the very notion that it was a gimmick film. And I kind of like low-key shamelessly fell in love with the first one. And I probably haven't seen it in like 5 to 8 years. Like, it's been a while since I've revisited it. Because I went back and rewatched the first one also. But for me, I think the first one's a lot campier than I remember it being. But this one's an interesting film to consider in the entirety of the trilogy, because tonally it's completely different than the other ones. So, Mark,
What?
had you seen this movie before?
No, I've only seen the first one. I had no desire to see the rest of them.
Oh, you're welcome, Mark.
I mean, the original had the best slow speed chase ever.
It did.
And Feed Her will never be heard the same way again after seeing it.
That's true.
So what made you not want to watch the rest of them? Did you have you had enough? You saw one, you're like, I don't need this anymore?
Every once in a while, there's one of those movies I watch. It's just like, why does this even exist? And the first one happened to be one of those movies. So I couldn't imagine 2 and 3 being any better.
I will say the third one is one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
You all know that.
I mean,
I was texting you in the group chat we have of what the hell is this?
Yeah, I could not, when I was because I originally for this podcast was like, I'm gonna take a page out of Billy's book, gonna go watch the trilogy, and I got maybe 10 minutes into the third one, and I was like, nope, it's too terrible. It's too bad.
Did you make it to the human caterpillar?
I've already seen the third one.
Oh, so got it. Okay.
I know about the human caterpillar. I have no desire to go back and revisit the human caterpillar.
Well, I pushed through because I hadn't seen it. And I'm like, this is a really, really bad attempt at like a porn or something, because that was the biggest thing of the whole thing. It was more of a comedy porn than it was a horror movie to me.
And yet, Brie Olson is in that movie.
I didn't realize that. That's crazy.
Yes.
Yes, that's why I said it.
Wow. Can I try to
Brie
pitch?
Olson?
Just Google her.
What?
But Devin,
leave it.
Never mind. No.
Can I try to pitch you?
I remember y'all's discussion about porn stars being in the movie. No, I'm not Googling.
Today, Mark became a man.
I have a 19-year-old kid. That happened a long time ago.
Can I try for 1 second to pitch you on the brilliance of this trilogy? Because I've thought more than probably any human has about this. And I think the Human Centipede trilogy has one genuine gimmick going for it. Mm-hmm. The trilogy itself is a human centipede. The first movie is full food, full movie, full color, full plot, full character development. The second one loses something. It loses the color in it, and it loses the character, and it loses some of the dialogue and the plot. The third one is the least like a movie possible. It loses everything except for the color red. It's mostly just blood. All of the nutrients have bled out to it. All it becomes is a facsimile of the thing that started in the first one, like the food would move through a human centipede, each one feeding the other one.
Well, how about if you look at it a different way? Each one expands on the size of the human centipede, and that's how it expands on the trilogy.
I like that too.
The second one was 12 people. The last one was 2 of them. One was the human caterpillar, and one was the whole jail. So that they expand on each movie.
I want to take a commercial break because I want to jump into the meat and potatoes of this movie.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
We will be right back. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm,
or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Welcome back to Abyss Gazing, where we are talking about ass to mouth. I mean, Human Centipede 2.
I'm glad you said it because I was trying not to.
I was thinking it the whole time.
I mean, in the words of Kevin Smith, you never go ass to mouth. Never. I will say, though, in all seriousness, going off of what Devin said before the commercial break, this is a movie that I think I talk about it being a gimmick. I think it gets remembered as a gimmick, but I think this movie is absolutely incredible. And this is where I joked that I might be getting canceled. I am genuinely surprised by how much I actually enjoyed this film. Going back on it, because I always joked that the Human Centipede is one of those trilogies that got progressively worse, and it started with the second film. Like, I hated this film, but I think my tastes in storytelling, film, and just being an overall cinephile, like, really, really have matured over the years since the last time I've seen this. It's been probably like 10 years since the last time I've seen this movie.
Or Psychopath, one or the other.
And there's a lot that I really value about what Tom Six does with this film. And you can say whatever you want to about this trilogy, but the fact that this film is both a gimmick but also a reinvention is nothing short of incredible.
I liked the idea a lot that, like, the first movie is a movie in this one. Like, it starts right on the last bit of the first movie, and then you watch the first movie's credits and then watch the main character watching this movie. And I don't think I've seen that before.
I mean, it's the movie interpretation of Texas Chainsaw Massacre made me kill these people.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, the whole movie is essentially one man's dream. Martin, all he wants to do is build a human centipede. He's got a song in his heart. He wants to do it.
And he didn't treat it like a movie. He treated it like an educational thing. He's sitting there drawing everything out that they're showing him, the doctor's showing on the screen, and trying to kind of measure with the pen and things like that.
I think the most surprising, and I can already hear Mark's eyes rolling back into his head, but the most surprising element of this movie for me is the fact that it's mostly silent. B, it's black and white, it's void of color, but there's so much emotion that is articulated through the Martin character. And it's this character study exploration of someone that is essentially, like, it's very cliche, but you're watching this character go through the mental health aftermath of being bullied, being sexually abused,
Mm-hmm.
Being also like blamed. I think one of the hardest scenes in this film to watch is the scene where Martin's mom like basically blames Martin for his dad going to prison. It's like, do you value the life of your child and over do you not value the life of your child over this person that sexually assaulted him? Like, that to me is just absolutely bananas to consider. And this film is just bleak as fuck when it comes down to it.
And not only that, I mean, she gaslights the situation too by banging on the ceiling and then saying he's the one that's bothered when she's screaming, "We'll kill us both." And on top of that, the scene with the doctor in this movie, the psychologist or whatever, that's sitting in the back seat getting head, and he's saying, "I want Martin, I don't want the girl." So that's kind of twisted right there on its own.
Yeah, this was mentally scarring.
I mean, I at least thought it was interesting in terms of how he's been treated and how he continually is treated, but then how he feels like he can find an identity. I mean, of course, it's not a good identity. You don't model yourself after a movie, but he latched on to the talking points of Human Centipede 1. I remember when Human Centipede 1 came out, part of the marketing was what he latched on to was this is a scientific or a medically accurate procedure that they're doing.
Yeah.
This could literally be done. That's what drew him into this and made him latch on to this too. So it's like, what does this damaged person like cling on to? And it's the marketing around this film.
And speaking of the damaged person, one of the things I really pulled from it was when he was making the Human Centipede, or after he did, and he was trying to work with it, one of them got sick or died. I can't remember what it was. And he was treating it like a toy, not a human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a possession, not a toy. He had a temper tantrum because it went wrong.
Well, he didn't really find an identity, though, because it's all happening in his head while he's sitting there watching the movie. So he didn't really find any sort of identity. He was just fantasizing about doing this to the people that he hated.
I would disagree a little bit. I think this Martin's arc throughout the course of this film is a cautionary tale of the impact that media has on us, for one, and for two, also the fact of it. We talk about practicing healthy mental health practices and articulate them. Finding them in media like the original Human Centipede is not a valid way to go. And there's this moment in the film where you literally see Martin break, and there's just no going back to them. I mean, he's just literally been quite literally pushed over the edge.
But then you find out, again, it was all in his head the whole time.
I think the one thing that struck me the most, though, is that it was in his head the whole time. And even though it was in his head the whole time, yes, some silly things did work out. Like, he had got Ashley Yenny, like, to think that he was Quentin Tarantino's producer and come out. Like, there were some logical leaps in what he had done. But in the end of his own fantasy, he still ends up dead. And in, like, quite possibly the worst possible way than anyone else, which is, I think, one of the things that made me stop and pause about what his own fantasy involves if at the end of it he doesn't survive it.
I took it as, he had been pushed so much and everything, his happiness would be better off dead than alive and still dealing with anything that's going to come at him. I mean, but maybe I'm reading into it. I
like that. I like that reading, but I really do.
I read into it every week.
Or he didn't see any other way for himself to turn out in the long run.
I mean, that's also true as well.
Yeah.
We, especially when you have a bleak life as much as Martin has, you are bound to kind of see things the way that, life is planned out for you. If you have felt like you've been dealt a cruddy hand the entirety of your life, you question literally the first good thing that happens to you.
And what about pointing out the fact of not even just Martin, just the fact that his breeding ground, I guess, or where he's getting everybody, is the parking structure where he works. So you don't know who's watching you or what they're planning, because he was watching all the cameras and videos to pick the people he wanted to grab.
I think that kind of makes I think it not only makes him a little bit more terrifying, but it gives weight to this concept a lot more.
Exactly.
To where when you look at the first film, we don't really know how the dude ends up kind of coming across it.
Right.
But then then you look and you see the two best friends that just happen to show up at his doorstep because they had no signal and they broke down. And even at the end, when the doctor's looking to replace the girls, the cops show up. So, this is someone that is very meticulous, someone that is literally lives in a dark fantasy. I mean, you see that it's not just him watching the movie, but he has an entire book dedicated to the signs and the art of the human centipede and its marketing and its quote unquote science that's in it. And I think that kind of also makes this film both a little bit cliche, but also a little bit terrifying as well.
And I looked at it a different way. Now, I know they use the R word in here, retarded, but I completely looked at it a little bit different just because I've had family, like nephews and everything. I looked at it as being on the spectrum. So
that's fair
that
too.
He sees the world a completely different way than we do, and that could be normal to him. Just because that's the way he sees it.
Yeah. And it's also too, like, I've talked about this in the past, but if you guys have listened to any Victims and Villains podcast before you've ever come out to an event, then you know that part of the thing that brought me to do mental health advocacy is losing a friend to suicide. And part of that losing a friend to suicide was that, what I ended up finding out afterwards was that his home life, he would hear the word, you're worthless, you're nothing. And after a while, your brain actually clings on and actually starts to believe those lies. And so, I think that you see some of that kind of some of that dynamic happening between Martin and his mother.
Yeah, I don't think it's just some. I think it's a lot. And
Sure.
And after a while, it does break you down. So,
well, there's a scene that struck me with that where he walks in on her stabbing his empty bed, assuming she didn't understand that he was there. And, she like feels ashamed, leaves, and he just lays down. Like, he doesn't like lock the door. There's no like sense of self-preservation. She still has the knife. Like, she could have come back and try it again. And he's just like, no, I'm going to lay down, which like made me feel specifically like he didn't value his life as much because of all that he's been hearing and how he's been treated his whole life as well. And it's like such a stark thing, and it's so different from how I think I would react in that situation. I'd leave for the night. I'd lock the door. Even
with the psychologist scene, and I'm guessing she was a hooker. It's never really specified. With the car blowjob scene, where he's confronts essentially the people, and I don't really think of him as a threat. They just almost kind of like laugh and smirk a little bit, like, they're somewhat confused, and then he shoots him. And I think even a scene like that is like a stark reminder of what you were just saying, Devin, about how like he doesn't have any value in his own life, and B, you never really understand the context of where somebody else is. And so, like, take 5 seconds and be compassionate, because that compassion can go quite literally a long way. I mean, I'm going to use an example, and a lot of people are going to laugh at it, but you look at the Steve Buscemi character from Billy Madison. I'm sure that there are quite literally a lot of people that have had those same dynamics as Billy had to Buscemi.
Well, something about the movie that didn't quite make sense to me is all these people going missing from the same spot.
And it not being tied back to him, like at all.
Yeah, like I guess nobody was reported, and nobody wanted to see any sort of cameras from the place or any.
And his bosses didn't watch the cameras.
I'm not one to usually pick apart loopholes, but that seems like a major plot hole in this movie. No one thought to check the cameras or investigate the parking lot that like a dozen people went missing from.
Or not only a dozen people went missing, weren't their cars still there?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was like blood all over the place from people being shot all up. And
didn't we leave a kid in one of them?
My running theory is that this is just the place where just shady stuff happens. So like literally I go back to the blowjob scene. That those three people, the two dudes and the girl, could have picked anywhere else to be blown. And they picked Martin's parking lot.
I feel like I live by that parking lot, by the way. I think it's 3 blocks over in Uxbridge. I think it's right over there.
Well, now you gotta go take a trip. You just go up there. Was the Human Centipede 2 filmed here?
Was it here?
You're gonna live podcast when you do it, right?
Well, so weird fun fact about where I live. The parking lot out behind me, there was a part in Thor 2: The Dark World where they go to a like wrecked parking lot that was out behind me, and they didn't do much to change it. So if it gives you a sense of like what part of London I live in, it's that part. So maybe his parking garage is around here. Oh,
that's fair.
But Billy, you brought up something that I thought was really interesting that I didn't think about when I watched the movie, is that he was watching them the whole time. That's an aspect of this horror that I didn't catch.
Yeah.
Because for me, I was like, okay, the scary part's when they become a human centipede. But also the scary part is somebody watching you in a public place the whole time. I had I had something happen one time, and it was actually with Alan. We were riding on an elevator, and we were commenting on the upcoming Incredible Hulk movie and how excited we were. And over the elevator's intercom, someone went, "Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun." Which, like, it took us like a second to be like, "What?"
It's better than them going, "Oh, it sucks."
Which would have been more accurate. But like, people are just watching you do stuff, and like, who knows? And like, sure, the guy that was watching Alan and I was a Marvel fan, but what if he wasn't? Like, that's a really terrifying aspect of this.
And what about if he just stopped the elevator till you agreed with him, or you couldn't get off? That's a movie we need to make.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
You don't agree with my picks. You're stuck. Let's discuss this.
In kind of building off of that, it's a funny story to hear, but it's a terrifying notion to know, especially in today's world, that this is a movie that was made 10 plus years ago, but we're constantly being watched, whether it's webcam, whether it's the phone cam, whether it's Google or Alexa or Facebook or Instagram or any number of social media, unless you're like Mark and you just live out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and I mean, they have things.
He wins.
Just throwing this out there because I learned this a couple of years ago. They also have things like, for instance, Cox is in my area. It's the internet provider. And they have it to where if you have a Cox wireless and somebody else is a Cox member, if they're walking down the street and their phone can hook to your internet because they're a Cox member. So I opted out of that. Prime had something similar to where it's called Sidewalk or something. I mean, all the security things that go around your security that are in your house to where once you do that, if like me, I've got a Nest, I've got Amazon devices in here, I've got cameras, I've got a doorbell. Once they get in, they have access to all that.
There was smart devices that we wanted in our house that after hearing certain horror stories, we decided to go away from them. Like they had an entire like state or portion of the country last year during one of the my brain is shutting down. One of the prolonged periods of hot during the summer.
There you go.
They locked everybody out of their smart thermostats and set everybody's thermostats to like 80.
That wasn't just anybody. I read that was actually the energy place in Texas that locked out all the Nests because they said it was costing them too much money and they locked it down.
Yep.
So that was an actual news report.
Yeah, we were looking at, and there's other devices that they do that with. I mean, how many times have you talked about, oh, I want to get some bookshelves, and you open up your cell phone and log into Facebook, and there's bookshelf ads.
Well, see, I proved it at the office when we were working in the office, Mark. I sat there with 10 people there, and they didn't believe me that their phones were all listening. Yeah. And I named an appliance 5 times in a row on purpose. And I was like, watch your phones. Within 10 minutes, they all stood up and said I was an asshole because all of them were getting the advertisements for toasters. I picked the random word of toaster, and all of their phones started giving them advertisements of toasters.
But to us now, that seems normal, you know?
Right.
And that's not normal.
To us now, it's what I'm saying. It seems normal.
It's accepted. It doesn't make it seem normal.
Well, look, Mark, we know you got the babysitting teddy bear there. You're okay. You're safe.
But what I was going to do before Mark interjected his commentary was that at the time of release for Human Centipede 2, it's, you know, I think even now it still feels terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's part of the reason why, you know, Halloween, John Carpenter, 1978, is as terrifying as it is because here not only are you being watched, and you kind of see that paranoia throughout the entirety of the film between Michael and Laurie, but also you don't know when it's going to strike. And I would argue that concept is even more terrifying here because, you know, you expect that if an attendant is watching the parking lot, he's not gonna come and kill you or shoot you or anything thereof, you know. That's like the scene where you have like the domestic disturbance, like are a couple arguing, and he just like walks over with a gun and just shoots them. Like that's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, and what makes it terrifying is it's not a far thought to think this could actually happen versus it's so far out there it would never happen. Now it's like I can actually see that.
Yeah, and I think, and it sucks to say this, but I think that you would see that in a setting like a school or a church as we get progressively more and more. This past weekend actually just had the high school I graduated from. There was a 15-year-old freshman just died from a school shooting.
Oh,
and like I've been getting text messages from, you know, my family, but also messages from like people that I haven't talked to since I graduated. And this is like a very real reality now that so much of the younger generations behind us are facing.
And I think part of what strikes me about this too is kind of like that. It's almost indiscriminate who he picks, where there's kind of a sense in some horror movies that you'll see is you'll watch, you know, the jerk high schooler or the couple having sex. How dare they? They're the victims. But in this one, like, it was almost just whoever happened in the parking garage that he could get his hands on.
Except for one person.
Except for the guy upstairs. No?
Well, except for 2.
Okay. What was the other one?
The girl that was in the original movie.
Oh, yeah. He blamed her, yeah. Well, he had a little crush.
He had a crush. And he kind of made it that he was making a part 2 or a movie and had her come in. That's the only 2 he had planned. All the other ones were randoms.
Yeah. They were literally just whoever happened to be there. And I mean, you know, the movie almost makes a case against the domestic dispute people. And we're like, oh, look at them fighting. Aren't they ugly or bad for it? You know, of course, they're part of this, but the rest of them, relatively just innocent people.
I think this movie's kind of interesting to look at through those lens. This is a film that normally you come to a movie to escape, and you know you don't want to think about how terrible humanity is or how fucked up as a society we are. And this movie's like just holds a mirror up for literally 88 minutes. And not only with Martin are you seeing the result of society pushing a single individual so far that he is now looking at violence and possibly even suicide as the only means to survival. But then on this other, you kind of also get the bleak things that also take place within this parking garage as well.
And it's funny you say it holds a mirror up for 88 minutes or 80 minutes, because he literally holds a mirror up through the human centipede, going through combing their hair and everything.
Oh yeah, he does.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was trying to show their self-image to them while they're in the human centipede just kind of hits on what you were saying, Josh.
Or he's just broken to the point he likes torturing people in his own mind.
You know,
It could be.
I mean, it could be a whole lot simpler than y'all want to make it out to be. Well, there's a real good chance you're reading it way too far.
I don't know. I think some choices are really intentional for this.
Yeah. And I go back to, a couple of the other arguments that are two other films that I hold near and dear that are widely panned by most people for being dumb, irrelevant, so on and so forth. Batman Forever is the first one I'm going to mention. But when you look at that film and you look at the context of how it sets up and studies psychologically the Bruce Wayne character, it speaks volumes. And granted, a lot of people, majority of people, have not read the director's cut, and they're not nerdy like I am. So I know a little bit more about that movie, but I also look at the character studies of Laurie, Sheriff Brackett, and any Brackett from Halloween 2 as well. This is a film that is widely panned for being just a weird Rob Zombie film. I think it's brilliant. I think it showcases a brutal honesty of what it's like to endure a tragedy and trauma and how that trauma affects him. And then you can also say the same about the Loomis character. And I think this film is, yes, it could be written off as just another dumb film. I remember one of the press quotes from this movie when they were promoting it is that Tom Six, the writer-director, was like, "Oh, the sequel, it's going to make the first film look like My Little Pony."
Yep.
And that quote has like always stuck with me, but I think now looking at this as a more seasoned adult that has taken approaches to, the question of what does film teach us about mental health, I think this is a perfect example of a something that you can say, you can write it off, but I think a lot of the things that we're saying are 100% present on the screen.
Well, this comes back to the Lex Luthor quote, doesn't it? Someone can read War and Peace and think it's just a good book. Someone can unravel the whole mysteries of the universe by reading the gum packet. I mean, art is what you bring to it and how much you're willing to interact with it. And so that's why I love doing movies. That's why I do this, like doing this podcast. That's why I like doing the other ones, because I've come to movies that have changed people's lives and walked away going, meh. And on the other hand, I watched Phone Booth with Colin Farrell and wept like a baby at the end, and it changed my life. So like, who's to say what's going to affect us and what we're going to walk away with? And that's why I love having these discussions, because I mean, Mark, you walked away with, all right, it's just this movie. And, Billy, you looked way into the movie and tried to get the layers to it. And I think that's so cool, because the movie didn't change. We didn't see 4 different movies. We saw the same thing, and we took from it what we brought to it. And that's what I love.
I think building off of that note is also, you look at Martin in this film. Most people looked at the first Human Centipede and were like, this is hot trash. Yeah. And, just kind of wrote it off and said the same thing for this film and the third film. I will give them the third film. But this film, when you look at this film, you have that exact argument present to where most people wrote it off. I mean, Martin's mom called this basically body porn, right? But then to Martin, this film is like bread and butter. This is the first time that he's been seen or heard or understood as an individual.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I mean,
Mark?
it's true. It's and I think it's really profound in that way. I like it.
But when it goes back to it all being a dream, it doesn't really.
I don't think so. I think that in that dream, even though it was all nothing, you see him not only essentially kind of process what his life is amounting to, but you see the only moments of real joy that character's had that we've ever seen or have ever been told he's had. I mean, we know he's had a rubbish life up until this point, but at one point in his fantasy, he is laughing and smiling and is genuinely happy. Now, granted, it is at the expense of 12 people undergoing very, very horrible things, but you see that cute little smile on his face.
I mean, in a dream of subconsciously, isn't that how you deal with a lot of things, Mark?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Mario 2 was a dream. The whole game was based on a dream, but I still like going back and playing the game. So,
but that's a physical experience.
Well, hold on. When does the dream thing in movies work for you guys, or does it never work for you guys?
It seems like a cop out a lot of the times.
Yeah.
I agree a little bit with Mark.
yeah.
That it can feel like a cop out, but also at the same time, I think that it can be a kind of a brilliant exploration, as it is here. You know, what is as Billy said, you know, what is the subconscious of this character? You know, and as Devin says, like, you're getting to see really the only fleeting moments of joy that this character has.
See, one of the movies I've always loved that you may not like, Mark, that is a dream movie is Inception. I love that movie.
Oh, Inception was good.
That's a great.
Oh my God, Mark came on board. What do you know? So, but
I like
going back to
Christopher
dream-
Nolan movies for the most part. There's only like one I don't.
But I mean, I agree with you. A lot of movies can be a cop out, but using it Inception as an example, some of them can be brilliant. That even at the end of the movie, you don't know if they're awake or asleep. So it just depends on how it's written and how it comes across to if it works or not.
But it was also a plot point of the movie, where in this it was you get to the end and go, oh, he was just imagining it all.
Well, I think that's part of it. What is the function of the dream in the movie? Because if the function of the dream is to artificially resolve conflict, right? Somebody dies, this like irrevocable thing happened, and then someone woke up and it was all gone. That feels like an unsatisfying conclusion to an arc.
Sure.
But we've already had the conclusion to the arc in the dream, and seeing that it becomes a character study. It stops becoming a horror movie and becomes a study of the person. Where, like in Inception, the purpose of the dream is specifically to raise stakes and be the drama and the impetus for the conflict, not a gross way to resolve it.
Yeah, and I mean, to Mark's point, like, I also see some of the times that, like, it's a cop out to where it's like, it was all a dream. Because most times it's I didn't know how to end this story, so I just kind of said it was all. I wrote myself into a corner, so I undid it, by kind of going that route. And I think I agree with both Devin and Mark is that it depends on how it's used in the story. It depends on the purpose. If it's written as a cheap way, get out of jail free card, then I'm not here for it. But if it's written as this, like you said, like Devin, this character study, this exploration of a single individual, and it kind of validates, really the experience that we're going on for 90 to 120 minutes.
So I gotta know, you guys do a podcast very frequently about horror movies. How do we feel in this room about gore, and specifically the gore in this movie? Because I've seen all the Saw movies, right? I like the Saw movies. Judge me if you will. But this movie made me like cringe a couple of times.
Mark,
What?
you go first. You go first.
Yeah.
Oh, me?
Yeah. Mark's the gore person. Go first.
Are you the gore person, Mark?
How am I the gore person?
You are now.
You are now dubbed gore person. Go
How
first.
did that happen? Fuck.
Good old
Dang.
gory Mark.
I mean, there's some cringe moments, like when he's pulling out the tendon from the kneecap.
That one. It was that one, by the way, in case you were wondering. That one.
No.
But
No.
for the most part, it was just another almost like slasher. Not, I mean, if you've seen like the Terrifiers or anything along that line, it's nothing much more than that.
Have you seen the Terrifier films though?
Who, me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Have both of them?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just making
Okay.
sure.
Don't be dumb.
I feel like you almost
Anyway.
seem offended by that.
Because the last time I checked with him, he hadn't seen it. Like I knew he had seen the first one, but I didn't know if he had seen the second
Oh
one.
man.
So welcome to the club. I think for me, I think the black and white aesthetic really kind of softened a lot more of the blow here when it comes to gore. I traditionally love gore in movies. I think the Mark was the one that showed me, so I'll give him credit. But the Evil Dead remake, it's a freaking masterpiece because it's of how you use gore, like, and to an overkill level, but also at the same time, like, managed to have it as an extension of the story.
And it also put Fede Alvarez on the map.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Go check out our Alien Romulus episode. It's a great episode. But yeah, I will say here, I think that for me, the moments where I was most squeamish was definitely in the first film, and it was definitely any time that you would get like a close up of the scars and like them screaming because they were ass to mouth. For me in this one, also science apparently doesn't exist in this universe, because you see in the first film when they're processing food, the eventual like poop happens, like it takes time to digest. Here it just streamlines.
Express train.
No.
He injected
like
he injected all of them with like industrial strength laxative.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was
fair.
I
like
still don't think it
pure
works that
colon
fast.
blow.
No, I don't either.
Not within seconds. No. It's squeezing their stomach ain't gonna do anything. But I mean, I love gory stuff too. The parts that really got me were after watching the centipede itself, the actual centipede, not the humans, how it reacted to everything, where what they do, put it down his throat or put it up somebody else's somewhere else. And that's the ones that
What
made
have
me.
you been watching?
I've watched the color version. Remember? So I went back. It probably has some other stuff in there.
So there are different cuts of this movie, by the way. There were scenes missing from the one that I watched this time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I had to get it through IFC through YouTube first to watch it.
Got it.
And then I Googled it before we came on the podcast because I was like, I'm interested. Is the color version out there?
I found the website you were talking about, and we might have to have a discussion, little boy, when we're done.
I didn't say it was real. I just said they had color to it.
The day Billy became a man.
No, he's got the wrong version because all
Billy-
he would Google it, it came straight up. So don't even.
Billy, was the gore different in color? Like, was it more visceral? Like, did the black and white soften it?
It did soften some of it, yes.
Okay.
Some of it worked better in black and white, but some of it, like the stapling and all that stuff,
Yeah.
that came across a lot better. And some of the other things, like I went back and watched it because when he was feeding them, I'm like, what is he feeding them? And I can see more that when he put the tube
Like
down
dog
the throat, right. The second one was soup. He fed her soup, pure liquid, which would have digested quicker.
Interesting. Okay.
Not that quick. And
Not that quick.
when they pulled out the laxative, I was totally expecting like a fire hose effect at the end.
It kind of was though.
I was
Instead of
expecting the
just
back
splatter.
wall to be like covered.
They got it on the camera, and that's part of what got me. And I'm like, because I don't want it near me. So I looked up a few facts about the movie, and my favorite one was on the feces in the movie.
Oh God!
So
Bring it on.
The feces in the movie was actually a combination of cocoa powder, vegan condensed milk because one of the actresses in the Centipede was vegan, crushed ginger, and biscuits for texture. And it was apparently so tasty that members of the cast and crew would just eat it on breaks.
So when I was growing up, we would do these youth lock-ins, and part of the game that they would play was called Loaded Diaper. So what they would do is they would like open up a diaper. They would take something like a Butterfinger or Snickers bar or
And
anything that
melt it
had
in the
like
diaper.
texture. You would melt it in the diaper, then you had to eat it. And I could never get over the way it looked. So like having to like eat something that's like the way that you describe it, I'm just like, no, hard pass.
Why were y'all playing
Not
games
happening.
for expected moms?
Yeah, that's when they play at baby showers.
That's
Wait,
baby
is it
shower
really?
game. Yes, it
Yes.
is. Seriously, 100%.
Well, guys,
That's
look,
a baby shower.
he also played other games like Guess the Gender. He played Pin the Tail on the Baby. They learned to do diapers. Guys, they got wild.
Yeah, it was a wild time.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I also, Devin, I will say this because there's been a few times over the last year that I'll just be like, one of these days we're gonna do the Human Centipede, and it was always just a funny joke that I think Mark would just write off, and yet here we are.
Oh
No, I don't write off anything. I
Mark-
kind of expect it at this point.
you just keep it here like this is happening.
It's gonna happen at some point.
So it sounds like, Mark, I'm very sorry.
I mean, I'm not sorry. This. I will also say this viewing and preparation for this gave me a brand new love for this film.
Oh, that's so cool.
I came in expecting to hate this movie, and I was like about halfway through it, and I was like, dude, this is a better movie than I remember it. This almost acts like a silent film almost. And I was really surprised by how like lack of dialogue there is, how much the film relies on the first film, and how meta it is at the same time. Like it's a crazy little movie.
Yeah, I came in going based on what Mark was telling me because, like I said, I had never seen it. So when I was listening to Mark, I'm like, "Oh, this is gonna suck," blah blah blah. And I started watching. I'm like, "What the hell's wrong with Mark?"
Are you saying I was the voice of reason in all of this?
I guess so. That's the crazy part. I guess you're the one that's doing the Human Centipede this time.
Well, I will say thank you, Devin, for bringing this on here. This is not, when I said worst movie, this is not what I was expecting. It was a pleasant surprise. So thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime, man.
But surprise September rolls on next week. It's Billy's turn to pick. So Billy, what do you got for us?
Well, I'd like you to turn around and point to your poster that we've been talking about for 3 months that we're going to watch. It's called Immaculate.
Oh, Immaculate. Okay, cool. All right, bet.
I knew you'd like that one.
Bet. All right.
I
literally
not allowed to pick anything.
I literally pulled it out of like my Blu-ray collection last weekend to watch this week. So
Oh, sweet. I watched it this past weekend, and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to talk about this one. and I noticed the theme between the first two movies that this one has in it too, and I'll point it out next week.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, this is kind of, if this month is ending up a lot bleaker than I thought it would be. So and that's not a bad thing. These have been great conversations, but yeah. Anyway, but Zambies, I promise we'll pick something 100% light. She's got a fun pick. That's all I will say. But Devin, where can people follow you online? Where can people find You Have to Watch This?
So You Have to Watch This podcast can be found really anywhere that you get your podcasts. We're on Pandora, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that good stuff. You can find me specifically if you're interested. I'm dstruthers13 on Instagram. Feel free to give me a like and follow. Sometimes I cook mac and cheese really fast online. It's just the thing I do. So
have you ever had jalapeno mac and cheese?
Don't even play. It's incredible. It's incredible. You make it?
Yes.
Where do you live? I'm coming. I'll be there.
I'm in Mississippi. There's a reason why I'm fat now.
I will be there. For homemade jalapeno mac and cheese, I'm there.
Yeah. I love mac and cheese.
Oh,
it's super flexible.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those overlooked dishes that people just like overthink, but you can do anything with it almost, and it's fantastic.
I got into an argument with somebody over here who is Italian who said that on their face they have to hate everything about mac and cheese. So my goal is to change their mind about mac and cheese. So it could even be jalapeno that does it. I think you might be onto something, Mark.
All right. Well, speaking of Instagram and sometimes updating it, sometimes don't. Also, go give Devin a follow because I love his mac and cheese videos. So, Mark, where can people find you online?
On Instagram, sometimes posting, sometimes not. Usually miniature involved, painting miniatures. When I do decide to post something, titanium juggernaut painting.
And Billy, where can people find you online?
Of course, you can come find me at Letterboxd at VABoy99.
You guys can also find me. I am over at Captain Nostalgia over on Letterboxd, only platform I'm really on. But you guys make sure that you guys follow Abyss Gazing wherever you guys get your horror podcasts or wherever you guys get your podcasts from. And also hit the subscribe button on our parent company podcast, Victims and Villains, where we've got a lot of cool stuff coming up in the next few weeks. The stuff that we've been sitting on or we're slowly releasing. But you guys can also find Victims and Villains on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Patreon at patreon.com/victims and villains, where you guys support our mental health education efforts and see all of us in beautiful HD video. What's cooler than that? You get video, bonus content, and you're helping mental health. So
you're trying to get us more viewers, not scare them away.
That's true. That's true.
You were
we'll block out Mark. Until next time, we'll be back talking Immaculate next week with the astral cadence. Sorry. What a tongue twister. The astral cadence. We'll be back next week talking with them. So until next week, remember, the longer that you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.